Yeah, good morning, good afternoon once again. My name is Toluwase Asubiaro. I'll be co-presenting with Marc-André and Philippe. Mongeon is a co-author of this paper. By the way, I will provide a brief background to our study and briefly discuss the methodology of the study. Before I continue, this presentation is part of an ongoing study at the University of Western Ontario, where the unbundling big deals laboratory is situated. And what we do in the lab is we study the effect of article processing charges and unbundling practices in Canadian libraries. Yeah, so a brief background to the study itself. I'll be talking majorly about two things: about the article processing charges, that is APC, and I will also talk about big deals. So I will start with big deals. It's easier to talk about big deals by talking about the serious crises. So before 1960s, most of the publishing houses belonged to academic societies and universities. But in late 1960s, commercial publishers started, to buy some of these academic presses, from societies, academic societies and universities. That came with some advantages. These commercial publishers, they were more efficient. They disseminated knowledge in a more efficient manner. So that was something good. They brought that to the table. On the other hand, because they wanted to make profit, they started to increase cost of subscription to journals, and this led to a crisis. The prices of these journals became unaffordable. Libraries could not afford to pay for journal subscription prices. In 2001, a solution was proposed. The publisher suggested that libraries should, buy bundles, journal bundles, instead of buying units of journals. And they called this big deal. That is, bundling journals together and paying for those bundles so that cost per unit of these journals will reduce. I mean, subscription cost will reduce per journal. 15 years later, there was another crisis. And this time, because of the astronomical increase in subscription prices, which surpassed the average national inflation rate, libraries could not, afford the big deals this time, and something happened. They started to unbundle the big deals, and that's one of the things we are studying in the lab, looking at how Canadian libraries have been doing this. Now, for instance, between 2011 and 2016, journal subscription prices increased by about 56%. That was actually way too much because one, inflation price was much lower, and two, the budget of this library was either stagnant. Increase in the budget of this library was either stagnant, And some libraries, in fact, some libraries experienced budget cuts, so they could not keep up with, you know, these increments. And as I've said, some of them, they started to unbundle, you know, the big deals. Well, this while the publishers were smiling to the bank, especially the big ones, the big five, Elsevier, Springer, uh, while they were smiling to the bank, while they were smiling to the bank, the libraries were having, it was very tough for the libraries to afford I'm sorry. It was very difficult for libraries to pay, and they had to unbundle big deals. Now, well, this chart shows the profit margins of the 5 biggest publishers in 2018, and some people have remarked that academic publishing is one of the most profitable businesses around because of the high profit margin. Now, while journal subscription, you know, is well discussed, of course, many studies have discussed journal subscription, the effect on academia. There is another cost that universities are bearing that is less discussed, and that is APC, article processing charges, which is what we are looking at this afternoon. Probably we'll say it's hidden in plain sight. Well, while open access is a good thing, it has many advantages. Well, it comes at a cost. You know, there are so many benefits of open access. Of course, research has shown that open access articles are more cited. Authors in developing countries can have access to, you know, knowledge in open access articles as opposed to those to subscription-based articles. Now, with all these advantages, open access comes at a cost, and you know, we are looking at, okay, how much, what does it cost? What does it cost Canadian libraries to actually make their papers, you know, to make their papers open, to publish their papers in open access model, or, you know, of scholarly publishing. And as I've said, APC is one of the main sources of open access funding. While APC is one of the open access funding, these big publishers see it as a way of making money. While it's needed, well, there are outrageous open access fees. Of course, we've seen some of them. And as I've said, APCs are rarely calculated, and people rarely talk about, you know, the implication of these APCs on universities. Now, you know, as I've said, there are very reasonable open access fees. At the same time, there are outrageous open access fees. Of course, while we are not recommending a threshold, but, you know, researchers have come out to actually call out some outrageous open access fees. Now, the objective of the study is to look at the amount that universities in Canada, 29 CARL universities in Canada have paid for journal subscription, and also look at the estimate and also look at the APCs these universities have also paid. You know, in addition to the you know, the cost of subscribing to these journals, we are also looking at APCs and to the methodology. Now, what we did was we collected subscription cost data of 29 research libraries in Canada between 2015 and 2019 from the CRKN. This data is available online. We also collected articles and reviews that were published by these universities and indexed in Web of Science between 2015 and 2019. Journal articles published by these universities were collected from Web of Science. We used the DOIs we actually used the DOI to identify the open access status of these articles from Unpaywall database. We obtained the APCs of the journals of the top 5 publishers from different sources. From OpenAPC, we also checked publishers' websites to, you know, some were available, some were not available on publishers' websites. We also looked at existing publications that have worked on APCs and made their data available online. Now, to avoid counting the same APC twice, corresponding authors, universities were considered. What I mean by that was, you know, we assume that the corresponding author paid, you know, the APC. So the university of affiliation of the corresponding author was assigned APCs, you know, APC payment. I want to hand over to Simard, to Marc. Marc-André will continue with the presentation. Yeah, thank you.
Hi, so thank you very much, Toluwase, for doing the first part of the presentation. I'm going to head on with the results. So I will go with the final sprint. So basically, this is the first figure, which shows the evolution of gold and hybrid APCs that were paid to Elsevier, Sage, Taylor, and Francis, and YLA by the Canadian universities from 2015 to 2019. So looking over these 5 years, we see that the amount of APC paid to these publishers has been steadily increasing from $2.2 million in 2015 to $3.2 million in 2019. So those are US dollars. So in total, over $14 million in article processing charges has been paid, with nearly 2/3 of those APCs being paid for hybrid open access journals, which represents a considerable amount in double dipping practices. Looking at the total amount of money that was spent by Canadian universities in subscription fees and APCs between 2015 and 2019 for, again, those top 5 publishers, we see that over $295 million have been invested in scientific publishing, including nearly $280 million in subscription fees alone. According to these numbers, the APCs paid by Canadian university represent roughly around 6% of the total amount of money spent on science publishing by Canadian universities. Looking at individual universities, we see that between 2015 and 2019, we see the total subscription prices and APCs paid by Canadian universities between 2015 and 2019, again for Elsevier, Sage, Taylor, and Francis, and Wiley. So the results show that there's a considerable variation between the different universities, with the general trend being that bigger universities such as the UFT are paying considerably more money in subscription fees compared with smaller ones such as the Memorial University of Newfoundland. Looking at the APCs paid by Canadian researchers affiliated to Canadian universities, these numbers also varies considerably from a university to another. But again, the general trend is that bigger universities tend to spend much larger sums on APCs than the smaller one. So I'm going to conclude very quickly. So overall, our results indicate that the sum paid for access to scholarly journal in Canadian universities has been continuously and largely increasing over the last 5 years. This increase has been occurring despite a lot of recent efforts to reduce subscription fees, such as big deal canceling. And it's also been happening despite the increasing adoption of open access as a business model for publisher. In principle, this would probably come with a reduction of subscription fees for universities when you take into account the fact that the recent growth in open access uptake has been evaluated as high as 50% in the latest studies. But instead, open access under the APC regime appears to be adding a financial burden on top of the already extremely high burden on Canadian higher education caused by subscription prices. So thank you very much. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them. And also, we would like this to turn into a big discussion. So anyone who has any thoughts or any ideas, feel free to participate. Thank you very much.